Consider the cases of Mahar Arar and Khalid El-Masri. Mahar Arar is a computer programmer from Canada who was apprehended at JFK Airport in New York on his way to an African vacation with his family. Instead of going to his vacation, he was sent to Syria, where he endured 8 months of torture in a coffin-sized prison cell. The Syrians eventually released him when they realized he was just an innocent computer programmer. Khalid El-Masri was an out-of-work and out-of-luck German auto mechanic of Lebanese descent who went on a vacation in Europe's Balkan mountains. He was unlucky enough to have a name that was similar to a real al-Qaeda operative and endured months of detention without trial or charges, as well as torture, and was eventually released when the CIA realized they had the wrong guy. See, the beauty of having a jury trial is that you only punish guilty people. The guilty still go to jail after the trial system. Trials do not protect the guilty. They protect the innocent. Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh was not protected by having a trial. He's still dead. Sometimes I think I need to remind radio talk show hosts of this, just like they used to say on Saturday Night Live about General Francisco Franco. This just in, Timothy McVeigh was still not protected by having a right to trial. He's still dead. Presidential candidate Mitt Romney agrees that we ought not to provide trials to people we apprehend, essentially guaranteeing there will be more Khalid El-Masris and more Mahar Arars, innocent people tortured at the hands of American spies and their foreign surrogates.
I don't want the people that are carrying out attacks in this country to be brought into our jail system and to be given legal representation in this country. I want to make sure that what happened to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed happens to other people who are terrorists. He was captured. He was the so-called mastermind of the 9/11 tragedy. And he turned to his captors and he said, "I'll see you in New York with my lawyers." I presume ACLU lawyers. So that's not what happened. He went to Guantanamo and he met GIs and CIA interrogators, and that's just exactly how it ought to be.
But you are an American, right? You have nothing to fear. Mahar Arar and Khalid El-Masri are foreigners, and you're not. They wouldn't do such a thing like deny a trial to an American citizen, would they? If ever there was any doubt that the war on terror was not a war on the rights of American citizens, the leaking of the Bush administration's first draft of the Military Commissions Act ended that doubt. Look at the text of the legislative proposal. Somebody wrote it up, and then somebody else in the administration struck out all the references to alien enemy combatants that were in there originally and replaced them with enemy combatants. No longer are they seeking only aliens. The definition of enemy combatants includes American citizens. The draft legislation, written in response to the Supreme Court rebuke of the Bush administration in the case of Hamdan versus Rumsfeld, would allow the Bush administration to imprison any American citizen, even if they are exonerated by a military commission star chamber. The legislation clearly stated that, quote, an enemy combatant may always be detained regardless of the pendency or outcome of a military commission until the cessation of hostilities, even if they are exonerated. Since President Bush has personally stated that the so-called war on terror will last a generation, and the draft legislation has numerous references to alien enemy combatants in which the word alien is crossed out, the bill specifically allows the president to target and imprison even exonerated American citizens indefinitely. Why else would the administration strike out the word alien, if not to target American citizens? How does it feel to have a president assert that he can imprison you indefinitely, even if the court exonerates you? All right, you've had your fair trial, now back to prison with you. Of course, the Bush administration propounded a draft law that said a terrorist suspect could go back to jail after a court had exonerated the suspect. But they wouldn't actually do it. I mean, that's crazy, outlandish stuff that only the kookiest, tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist would be alarmed at. They wouldn't actually do it, would they? But they already did. Boston-based attorney P. Sabin Willett represents one such innocent client, Adel al-Hakim, one of 5 innocent ethnic Uighurs, Chinese Muslims of Turkish descent, who were detained at Guantanamo. Willett explained in a column for the Washington Post in 2005, quote, Adel is innocent. I don't mean he claims to be. I mean the military says so. It held a secret tribunal and ruled that he is not Al-Qaeda, not Taliban, not a terrorist. The whole thing was a mistake. The Pentagon paid $5,000 to a bounty hunter and it got taken. The military people reached this conclusion and they wrote it down on a memo, and then they classified the memo, and Adel went from the hearing room back to his prison cell. Close quote. The official Bush administration line is that we must give up our right to trial by jury and right against arbitrary imprisonment and torture to protect us from a regime that wouldn't give us the right to trial by jury and would imprison us and torture us arbitrarily. Would somebody please page Joseph Heller? One of the problems with Adel al-Hakim is that it proves the Bush administration was not telling us the truth about Guantanamo. Every top person in the Bush administration told the American public that all of the people at Guantanamo were the worst of the worst. All of them were captured on a battlefield. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld told a radio interviewer on June 27, 2005 of the Guantanamo prisoners, quote, these are people, all of whom were captured on the battlefield. They are terrorists, trainers, bomb makers, recruiters, financiers, bodyguards, would-be suicide bombers, and probably the 20th hijacker, 9/11 hijacker. Close quote. However, they weren't all captured on a battlefield. The prisoners at Guantanamo have been termed by the Bush administration enemy combatants who are the worst of the worst. Do you want to hazard a guess of what percent of detainees lodged at Guantanamo, according to statistics released by the Bush administration itself, were captured by American or coalition forces on the battlefields of Afghanistan or Iraq? 7%. That figure comes from a study by a Seton Hall professor who took all of the public records released by the Bush administration regarding the circumstances of the capture of those in Guantanamo. He found about 45% of the Guantanamo detainees had a publicly disclosed record by the Bush administration of how they had been captured by the United States. Only 7% were captured on a battlefield. The rest had been captured by governments cooperating with the Bush administration or by bounty hunters seeking cash rewards for turning in suspected terrorists. Now, if Donald Rumsfeld and the rest of the administration says they all were apprehended on the battlefields of Afghanistan and only 7% were actually captured by coalition forces on the battlefield, that leaves three possibilities. Either Donald Rumsfeld was deliberately lying to the American people, or he has no idea what he's talking about, or he's both lying and has no clue about the origin of the men in his possession. All three possibilities are troubling for justice. It should be hardly surprising that many of the alleged worst of the worst of those supposedly captured on a battlefield in Afghanistan turned out to be innocent. Coalition forces distributed leaflets promising huge bounties for Afghans and Pakistanis to inform on their neighbors. One leaflet described in Afghanistan promised, quote, get wealth and power beyond your dreams. You can receive millions in dollars helping the anti-Taliban forces catch Al-Qaeda and Taliban murderers. There's enough money to take care of your family, your village, your tribe for the rest of your life. Boston-based comedian Jimmy Tingle has quipped that to collect that kind of money, he might discover he was a terrorist in order to turn himself in for the reward money. For that kind of money, I'd turn in Jimmy Tingle too. But the draft legislation was amended. The Bush administration, while it may have wanted to take away the rights of American citizens, hasn't actually done it. Or have they? They already did.